Welcome back to the Manager's Mic podcast. I have me today Reed Hansen, who's the Chief Officer at MarketSurge.io. Reed's career has been anything but ordinary, from working alongside his father to now leading a fast-growing digital marketing agency. Reed has lived the lessons of hard work, resilience, and innovation. Along the way, he's discovered how the right blend of people skills and digital strategies can drive growth, customer retention, and lasting loyalty. We're going to talk about Reed's journey, the mindset shifts that helped him level up from that start point, and the strategies businesses can use today to grow smarter and faster. I do want to really welcome you to the show, Reed. It's really exciting to have you on. It's been about a month of planning to get this going.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I'm so glad to be here. I really appreciate the collaboration.
So help me out, because one of the things that I find fascinating about your story, Reed, is you've gone from working in your father's landscaping business as a kid to leading MarketSurge.io. And I feel like in that story, there's this gap. It's just like Luke Skywalker, and then he didn't beat Darth Vader. So walk me through that gap, some big lessons that stuck with you along the way toward this journey, if I may.
Well, absolutely. As you mentioned, I had the experience. I think at the time I really didn't appreciate it. But from when I was about age 8 on, my dad would take me to work with him in the evenings and on weekends. And it was doing work like pulling weeds, piling rocks, doing some very menial things. He was a landscape architect. And, of course, I wasn't going to really help with the drafting of designs or anything. So, I was doing the monotonous stuff. But over time, I did really start to appreciate how cool it is to run and manage a business, and just always thought my dad was so cool. And that was something that I wanted for myself at some point. Well, so what do? I go to college and I immediately join a company and work in corporate. And ironically enough, my experience there was, I started with a tech startup in sales and learned a lot. I think diligence paid off. I don't think I was particularly talented at sales, except that I was very good at just picking up the phone and calling. And then if I got a no, I could bounce back quickly. And, I think that's been a really important characteristic throughout my career, is to be able to bounce back quickly, whether it's just hard-headedness or stubbornness, I don't know, but it has served me well. And so I had a variety of sales roles. Didn't always feel like that was a great fit for me. I'm a bit introverted, and I definitely prefer like thinking in my own head, or I'm sometimes a wildflower at parties. That doesn't really sound like a salesperson. But so I decided to go get an MBA to pivot a little bit and maybe go into something marketing related or strategy related. And after my MBA, I spent some time at Oracle and then worked for some digital marketing agencies. And there I felt like I was starting to make the bridge into marketing. My experience at these digital marketing agencies is I got laid off from the first one because it was getting acquired. And so I joined the next one called Punchkick Interactive, which 2 years later, the exact same thing happened. It got acquired and I was laid off again. Fortunately for me, the resilience really kicked in and I was able to bounce back. And I found a role at Northwestern University working in higher ed and building some custom programs at the business school for corporations to train their high performing talent. And it was, a great role, but I was really thinking, even at that time when I took the job, I was like, let me start strategizing and figure out how I could run my own business and go off on my own. The opportunity came up to actually purchase marketing agency, MarketSurge, which had been around for a few years. And we pulled the trigger and it took over. And so for the last 2 years, I've been CEO, Chief Growth Officer of MarketSurge. And honestly, this has been my favorite role ever. And I feel like every step of the way, I have acquired some skills or some learnings that have helped me in this current role. It's been fantastic. And I've learned a lot about myself, about management, and definitely about how the real world works.
As someone who's going through an MBA program now, hopefully to finish next year, I want to take my hat off to you. I'll have to contact you offline for some tips post recording. I'm curious though, because you had mentioned you went from journeying to sales, being an introvert, and looking back on those experience and all those things in your business. And the word that sticks out in my mind is the word resilience. I think that that was the catalyst for what you had said in your previous statement. Can you talk to me a little bit more how you define resilience and how your management skills and or leadership skills, if I can peel that onion with you a little more?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think for one, a leader should lead by example. And in any interaction, like anything you attempt, for all your efforts, there are you can do your job very well, and there will be other things that interfere, things that make your job harder or things that make your job impossible. And so you don't control everything in every adventure you take, every job you take. You don't have control as much as your performance is determinative. Sometimes the client just won't buy from you despite your best efforts, or the business you're working for just goes under for totally unrelated reasons. I think that's just something that we all have to get used to. Now, as a leader, I think that being able to bounce back, be unflappable in light of a lot of these circumstances is really, really important. I'll tell you just a little anecdote. I bought this agency in April of 2024. So it's not even been 2 years. 2 weeks after I purchased this agency, did an unresolved matter, contractual matter between the former owner and a few clients resurface, and it turned into a very expensive legal battle that we had
Okay.
to sort out. Now, I'll put to the side that we had put in some contract language that would reduce the price of the acquisition, but it did really consume a lot of my time and bandwidth, and it felt like a major setback. And it
Mm.
was very challenging for me to keep focused on growing the business. I won't say that it's perfect, but that was a moment where I decided, do I just quit on this or do I go forward? And I really felt like for the sake of my clients, for my employees, that I needed to keep a level head and not lose my temper, not be vindictive and take certain actions that would feel like revenge or something. I took the actions to just try to take the high road wherever I could and just end the legal matter. Now, I would say that I don't know the effect it had on my employees, but I do feel like we got closer throughout the process, and the trust really increased. And I think it's a really important characteristic of a leader. My father, I think, was very emblematic of that. Now, one part I left out of the story was that his landscaping business ultimately failed. He was great at the landscape architecture part of the business, but he didn't really have much marketing in place, and he didn't definitely didn't have any accounts receivable or collections processes in place. And eventually, that just caught up with him, and just got behind on bills and had to close his doors. It was a great lesson for me as well. He didn't just wallow in it. He pivoted to a new career, and he had continued his career in manufacturing, and now is a successful executive in the ethanol industry, and has done quite well for himself. I think that was a great example for me too.
I'm curious a little, if I may, and I appreciate you being very transparent in your
Yeah.
story with me.
Yeah.
I feel I can connect with you on being laid off. I've been laid off. And I think what for people who have been laid off, it takes a special type of emotional toughness that comes out of that. Do you feel, Reed, that because you had those experiences of being laid off, seeing what your father went through, and then was able to take that we'll say just be clearly pain and turn into pleasure elsewhere, that's what's allowing you to get through this challenge you're having right now, that if you didn't go through that, do you think you would not be handling it as well? And you're thankful now, and maybe there's some other lessons there that you're like, whew, looking back on it, thank goodness I was laid off now, because if I wasn't, this situation would be, it would feel much worse, is
Yeah.
typically what I've heard from other leaders like yourself.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't know that I would say that I am glad I went through it, but I do think that it had a strengthening effect on my mindset, that setbacks don't feel permanent. When I got laid off, I just felt like, oh man, the entire momentum of my career is over. And now I'm one of those guys that has been laid off. I'll carry that like a scarlet letter. And then of course, like doubly worse when it happened, like the very next job I got. But sure enough, I go into my next job and my next role, and I have acquired new skills, a certain kind of maturity, almost like a level of fearlessness that
Mm.
wasn't there before. Not that I'm completely fearless, but all of a sudden it's like I've gone through something and come out the other side, and I'm still alive. Like I'm not a broken person. I guess on one regard, it's like I am much better for it. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's very surreal when I was willing to work. I was doing a good job. This doesn't seem fair, but it also just gets you to the term is like sometimes a lot of the success you have in your career isn't fair either. That
Right.
was timing or circumstances that you didn't have anything to do with. It's almost like you just have to focus on the good qualities that make you a good employee or professional, and
Mm.
just be satisfied with that, and just do your best. And like you get enough at bats and you'll hit a home run at some point. So.
If you could speak in combination with the people skills it takes to get there and running your company, and then we'll start transitioning into market surge and the solution it has and what you've learned so far in acquiring and helping this type of customer. I call it an avatar because I played too many video games as a kid. But let's talk about the people skills and then start segueing, if I may, into market search solutions.
As I mentioned before, I'm by by disposition, I'm an introvert, and I like to think before I speak. I'm like very economical with my words. I don't necessarily just blabber. And I've got plenty of people in my family and my relationships that will do that for me. And so that's a-okay. And I find that I like balance my life with extroverts, and I'll take my wife to parties, and she will talk anybody's ear off, and I can just sit back and enjoy it. But I do feel like I have a natural ability to listen. And I've used that ability as much as possible to help understand different personality types, different approaches to solving problems. It's helped me increase my tool set for doing the same, for approaching problems, solving problems, just by learning from people. I've also had to go against my instincts at times. Like I said, natural listener, and I think I'm pretty empathetic, but at times I have had to really, like, I know I have to be more assertive in certain situations. And so it's like something I have to like plan ahead of time. Like, this is a situation where I'm going to have to be assertive. Like
Mm.
if the client comes with major pushback on pricing or something, I'll have to be assertive. And that's not the place to empathize or be the listener. Like, I have to learn to shift and almost like take on a new mindset approach, kind of like a new avatar. I have to like embody a new approach. And I think that's a good leadership story too. Like, I love to, I had an employee that we ultimately let go, but he had every story in the world for why he couldn't be on time to a meeting, or he couldn't complete a task on time. While I want to listen, I had to remind myself, no, this is a point where I need to be assertive. Like, he thinks that I'm the good listener, which I am, for our organization to work. This is the time where I need to be assertive, and he needs to know that we have boundaries and we draw a line. I guess the lesson from that is you have to embrace your natural qualities, and don't assume that, a little side note is I often assumed that as an introvert that I was bad at business or bad at sales,
Mm.
those characteristics made me less effective. But years later, I saw that it was just different. But as a leader, I think you have to be able to, at times, you have to embrace what comes natural. And then at other times, you have to recognize that I have to almost imitate somebody that has a different disposition or approach. I have to pretend to be that person in order to get the job done, in order to be effective. it's good to be able to take multiple approaches and not just be the same guy and or gal in every situation. Like you have to adapt,
Hmm.
and sometimes pretend, to do things correctly.
I imagine it's hard though in that story you told because since you had gone through those experience of laying someone off, my assumption would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of my challenges, I struggled to be too much of an includer. I want everybody when I do training facilitation to win. And I'm at a point in my life where I realize that's just not pragmatic. You don't need to name a name, but what would have been the opposite of that situation for that member or former team member of yours to had stayed? If somebody is struggling in their career, would you speak to that a little since you had shared that with me?
Yeah. So if I'd taken the approach of trying to continue to include him in the job or something like
Yeah,
that.
just
Yeah,
curious.
that's a great question because yeah, definitely I could have made additional concessions or tried to make it more of a learning opportunity. Now, I did take a couple factors into account. One was that he was already mid-career, and I was concerned that this was not that it would be harder to retrain somebody. And then two is I have had nice, friendly, what I'd say flexible or soft managers, which are so fun and so easy to be around. We laugh and joke. And I have been in situations where that has made me less productive. And I felt like if I didn't have clear boundaries or a little bit of a push, if my manager lowered himself to be a peer and let me walk all over him, then I would. And I recognize it in myself, they would make me worse. And so I could have definitely sought that. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to draw this out. I just saw some characteristics in this employee that I recognized in myself that maybe a wake up call was necessary. And I've had some wake up calls. They don't always come in the form of being let go, but in some cases, like that manager was removed, that he just was
Hmm.
not doing his job well. And in other
Oh,
cases,
wow.
our team didn't hit its goals and he wasn't managing us. And so it just became clear that this wasn't the right combination, and I also have to recognize, like, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I started off and just was unkind, and you can feel a little bit of guilt. I wasn't firm enough. And the result was that he's out of a job, and it's unfortunate, but I don't want to sound like a sociopath, but you do have to I think sales, if anything, kind of teaches you to have a short memory and to not have a lot of guilt about what's behind you and just to look ahead. What's the next call? What's
Hmm.
our next meeting? What's our next step? It's always tough. I mean, it's hard to let somebody go. I know the
Yeah,
market for his particular set of skills is pretty strong and
good.
he's going to land on his feet. It's just, you need to have the right combination. He probably needs a manager that is going to be very firm and straight with him. So,
I would say the mantra I'm living my life by these days is bless them, help me. That's something
yeah,
I just say over and over again. I
yeah,
hope bless that individual and help us. That's why we're growing. I want to get into your expertise a little more though on
sure,
marketing, if that's
yeah,
fair.
absolutely,
Because you run MarketSearch.io, which is an automation platform for email and text, and I was studying it, I want to get into the context a little more of the solution.
yeah.
And then I want to ask you, if I may, what are a lot of companies are chasing in these latest marketing trends? Because we've talked about sales a lot. You've come from that background. And I think that's really powerful. And you run a marketing team. I think I heard once that if you can sell, you can make hundreds of $1,000s, but if you can market and sell, you can make millions of dollars.
Yeah,
That's just
absolutely.
something I heard. I don't know. You can clear that up for me. But let's talk about your solution and what are the marketing trends companies are chasing now from your perspective, and what's actually really working, Reed, if that's fair. Hey guys, real quick, the only reason this podcast grows is because of you. When you hit that follow button or you leave us a review, it means the world to me. I did a cost analysis. Each episode, in terms of resources, costs somewhere around $2,500 and upward. We give a lot of this professional development away for free, but what makes the world to me is when you leave a review or you give us 5 stars, I will do everything in my power to make sure that the Manager's Mic podcast is exceptional and serves your professional development. Take care and back to the show.
These are great questions. So when I bought the company, it was primarily a software company that had a CRM. Now, a CRM for
Mm,
people in your audience, some are familiar, surely, but some may not be. It's something you would log into on a web browser. It's like a database, but it has some functionality to send emails, texts, and even create automated processes in there. So, for instance, if somebody filled out a web form on your website to contact us, that the system could send out communication based on that. It can also
mm,
send out communication if you uploaded a list of companies you'd want to work with, their email addresses. It could send a email blast or a text blast. Um, for those of us that get a lot of cold emails and texts, how does that happen? Well, there are systems like this that do that for you.
mm,
Now, the automation part is really helpful too because, as you said, it's a way to do a lot with less time. You know,
mhm.
used to be able you used to have to type out every email individually or cut and paste, but now the templates are saved and they can be personalized. Inserts the recipient's first name, company name, any characteristic that you have saved in the database. It can personalize. That's a powerful tool, and it's been around for a couple decades, but
Mm,
it's gotten easier and easier to use, less reliant on a developer to customize it for you. But just something that every business should have access to in some form, a CRM system. We also do some web development for our clients. If they need a website or if they need just single web pages, we do that. Redesigns, we do that as well.
oh wow.
Uh, yeah, and then we do ads management and SEO management to help get a website ranked higher in the search engines, but also recently in the AI search engines. So I'm happy to talk about that. But the as you probably know, is if you have an email address, you're getting tons of cold emails like all the time. Especially if you have a business, if you're in some leadership role or perceived buying role, you're just getting bombarded. And
Yeah.
a lot of us are getting these automated texts too. And so it's interesting, the emails, they have an open rate, just for perspective, of a good one about 3 to 15%, depending on how good, and a
Yeah.
response rate of like under 1%.
Oh,
um, so texts, when you send these out, they are much more successful. They are read. 95 to 97% of texts are open and read. So there is some benefit to sending texts. Texts can be more expensive. They're more heavily regulated. And so in both cases, if you send text to the wrong people, either incorrect email addresses or,
right.
say, the landline, you can damage your credibility for these systems and ultimately get restricted or blocked. So you have to be careful. You want to be very selective with who you do this with. Um, but I am not a huge fan of cold email blasts, period. Like, I think that there was a time when it was pretty effective, but
Oh,
I think there's a lot of fatigue around these approaches. I have pivoted, though we have that tool and we have the capability to do that. I've really pivoted towards recommending that people focus on content marketing. That would be what we're doing right now. Paul, you and I we're generating a podcast, talking about interesting things, sharing our personal experiences. Our faces are on this media, our
right.
voices are on this,
Right.
and it carries with it authenticity and like a real connection. And podcast is a great tool. You can also do solo videos where you're talking to the camera and promoting that on social media, using that on your website. The search algorithms love that content, and that
Mm,
really helps with SEO. But the content itself is more engaging and more valuable. So when they get to your website, they stay longer, they learn better, they like you better. The real people that would really want to work with you, they match. I like the way he talks. I love that. I love that endearing style. They will really engage and really want to follow up. Whether it's you produce a podcast or you seek a guest opportunity to podcast or you seek collaborations with journalists, those are all, I would say, much more valuable to help people find you and want to work with you That's so much more likely of an outcome, especially in services businesses, than it is to find people through just cold outreach. That's been really challenging the last few years.
Hmm. It's interesting, 3 to 15%, but your text messages, or you said were 90 to 95%.
Yes,
I'm wondering if there's a narrative here, Reed, where it's a combination of content marketing and maybe using a service. I think you had shared with me you have a unique PR service called Surge Links. Maybe we can
that's
peel
right.
that on you a little and explain
Yeah,
what that is. And maybe there's a combination between content marketing and these services. Maybe for some managers who are listening also who may not have a big marketing budget, what's a practical thing they could do also from this conversation to start improving more acquisition? I know you said content marketing, but is there a combination of the
sure.
two that you can also say, like, hey, if you do this hybrid model, here's what our customers are saying? And maybe there's a case study you have that you're comfortable speaking to on a high
Sure.
level without naming a name of a client to keep their privacy, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. The, and I think you're right. I think a hybrid approach is best. You don't want to rely on a single channel typically. You want to at least take a step in the direction of a few different approaches. I would say that having a CRM system, a customer relationship management system of some sort, is a must for any organization that really wants to grow,
Right.
because you need to have a record of all your contacts and your past sales. You need to be able to spot trends and be able to reach out to them for reviews, referrals, and upsells or resells. And
Hmm.
that's a great channel for you to maintain. But when you have new prospects, some buy, some say not right now, some say no, but you never know what will happen down the road when circumstances change. And so you need to keep
Hmm.
in touch with those people, and the CRM system's a great way to do that. So that's 101. And that CRM system can be combined with content marketing. When you create content marketing, maybe you make it educational content or you're talking about current events, but you include in your content a call to action. And that call to action is, talk to us for more information on this topic, or hey, we happen to offer this service that solves the problem I was describing. Let's talk. Let's set up a meeting. And so a CRM system can be the place where you have a calendar hosted where people can select times. Say you've posted this video, and the call to action is fill out this form and we'll get back to you. Well, that form goes into your CRM and it automates reminders to set up this meeting or sends the information you promised to provide. So those are two very important processes. SurgeLinks is a service we offer. It's digital PR, and when we gather some information about you and your business, we use some existing platforms that journalists use to source quotes and articles. They're writing a feature article on entrepreneurship and working from home, or entrepreneurship in very specific niche industry. Well, what we'll do is we will respond, we'll pitch you as the quote, and you will get the citation. So people reading the article will say, oh, so and so is an expert on this. Let me look them up. And there will be a backlink embedded in that, which Google algorithms and the large language models, the AIs, they love that, and
Really?
gives you so much authority, um, and it all comes back and it is channeled through your website, through web forms or other fields, to your CRM database so you can follow up. If you think about it as like everything, you channel everything towards this database, this CRM database. And by the way, these can be pretty cheap tools. In some cases, it's $50 a month, or there's even, I presume there's some free tiers on many of these CRM databases that you
Hmm.
can leverage. But everything gets funneled there, and then you've got the record, and then you can act from there, automate a response that goes out immediately, and people feel like they're being heard and that you're a responsive person to do business with.
What is a cadence of a pragmatic, practical cadence of action in combination with these tools, though? I
Mm,
think one of the things I see a lot from even small business owners who have started following my podcast, who I didn't imagine would follow the manager's mic, if I'm being real with you. But I think one of the things I hear, and I say wah-wahs not to be disrespectful, I say it like they share their wah with me. Like everybody has
Yeah.
wah on some
Right.
level. But what is a pragmatic cadence, a combination with these tools? Like you should be doing these X amount of like published articles with it, like 3 a month, 4 a month. Maybe we can speak a little bit to that cadence in combination with the tool so you can get the return on the investment.
So that's a great question. There's a few things. You'll have business pages on Google My Business, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I would make sure that you have established those, and you should post
Oh,
on those a minimum of once a week. You could
once a
probably
week.
post up to 3 times a week, but I wouldn't do more than that. That's one thing, and you can make them lengthy posts, but I would always include an image, not necessarily a link. They don't always appreciate the links to go to a different website, but the images or a video embedded in those posts are great. And then you will also want to maintain a blog on your website. A lot of this content can be kind of repurposed or restructured. You write the blog, for instance, and then you reduce it in length for the social media post. But the blog, I'd say like 1,500 words to 2,000 words. Make it
Oh,
on a single topic that's relevant to your business. And I think, once a week cadence is great. Really no limit onto how much you post. You may want to consider over the long term if you have monitoring tools to remove posts that don't get any links or any hits,
okay.
and just maybe rewrite them or repost them. Sometimes it's a timing issue.
Yeah.
Then let's see, some other cadence questions is, so how soon after somebody fills out a form on my website do I want to respond to them? Well, I'd say immediately. A text immediately is a great thing. And to the extent you're able, you should pick up the phone and call them. That's
Oh,
hard and that's not automated. That's you being
yeah.
proactive, but you should make sure you get a notification and call them immediately because they wanted to act then and they
Yep.
most likely looked at 2 or 3 vendors. And
Oh,
at that point, it's a race. You get to them first and you're going to have a significantly higher percentage of closing that business if you pick up the phone and call them right away.
I kind of nerd out on marketing
Yeah,
stuff. I don't have a marketing background personally. I have a lot of experience. I wouldn't
sure.
say a lot. I would say school of hard knocks experience trying to leverage what I go through the MBA program
Yeah.
now. And I want to peel the onion on going back a little bit to the personal growth and legacy conversation. Earlier in our conversation, we were talking about ethics, integrity. I'm curious about what's important to you to be remembered for. I feel you're at a place where you're at that surface level of breaking through some pretty exciting things. Again, what do you want to be remembered for, and how does that show up in the way you lead today, currently in your business with market search?
I'll take it back to my experience with my father, who, in his mind, he wanted to be the sole provider and really provide for his family. Now, that's not every family's approach or every individual's approach. He and my mother had agreed that they would divide the roles up in our family like that. For instance, in my marriage, my wife and I, we both work, we both provide, but we do still both feel a responsibility to our children. And my dad definitely took that seriously. When his business started failing, he took another job. And so he was working, trying to save his landscaping business, but then also working a swing shift at
Oh,
a factory to bring some cash in. And that was long. Sometimes it was 18-hour days and he
wow.
was exhausted. And I really felt for him. That was just very impressive. Now, if anything, I'd want to leave my legacy is help my children have the best lives that they could possibly have. Now, it doesn't always mean that it was a pure pursuit of wealth. I wanted to make sure I was both present for their lives and activities, but also helping them to see what a good career could look like and a positive home could be. That was essentially what I wanted my legacy to be. Is I hope I've lived up to that, but I feel like my 2 daughters have turned out really well and I'm very proud of them. Fortunately, I'm living through that, and in 2.5 years, they're going to both be out of the house, and
Oh, wow.
maybe I'll have to create new goals. We'll see.
I have 2 kids. My kids are 9 and 7, so they better not be out of the house in 2 years. I was also connecting with you earlier, Reed, and you're talking about is actually the introvert of the 2
Oh,
of us.
interesting. Okay.
I actually have to plan my day to say, okay, I need to pick up around the house more today. Because when she has to speak at a conference, I know it takes a lot of her because introverts, I know people, the definition she had shared with me was that it takes more energy.
Yeah.
While extroverts get their energy from people. But I personally feel you have a lot to give. And I personally feel that you've experienced some things that if somebody in their, I don't know how old you are, you look very young to me personally, younger journey can pull from this is that they can take some of these key insights that we've shared today on market and everything. I want to go a little bit of how you define the word legacy, though, because there's still a lot more you're going to be doing. What's your definition of legacy? And I am putting you on the spot. You have not prepared an answer. But between your father, having 2 daughters, building market search, studying this data, helping companies, acquiring an MBA. Although you're a Michigan fan, I'm a Buckeye fan. That's the only challenge I have with you.
Well, I think this is the year the streak ends, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out, right? You know, like if we lose this year, Reed, I'm deleting this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do it to you. But how do you define legacy, if I may?
Well, I think when you're at the like very high levels of society, your legacy can be carved in stone, memorialized in statues. And for the rest of us, though, we kind of live on in the memories of the people we had relationships with. And that's how I define what the legacy is. Now, if I think I'd define a positive legacy as having enriched the lives of the people that I leave behind. I don't think I'm going to write a book. I don't think I'm going to, have like leave a lot of records behind. But I do think that I can spend time with people that are younger than me, my own children, my hopefully grandchildren in the future, younger siblings, and both listen, encourage, and share my insights. And hopefully that turns into making their lives better. So, from a business standpoint, if I can work with new businesses, they're going to be much better at plumbing or real estate than I will ever be. But if I can share lessons from my field of expertise in digital marketing that help them grow their business and maybe make their families' lives better, then I'll consider that a positive legacy.